Welcome to Inside Ignite Coaching Voices podcast, where my goal is to help you gain deeper insights into the professional coaching. Here we bring diverse perspectives and expert insights from the world of coaching by engaging in conversation with seasoned coaches. I'm Pravin Sharma, a coach and a consultant. Welcome and thank you for joining. And it's my privilege to welcome Dr. Markus Moeder-Chandler into our show. Dr. Chandler, who is a teaching assistant professor at University of Colorado and also work as a program coordinator for human services. He's also an author of Group Dynamics and Group Process, Human Interaction and Counseling, Human Services, and Leadership. He's also a coach in the United States Air Force Academy Center for Character and Leadership Development. Please welcome Dr. Markus Moeder-Chandler. Hello, Dr. Markus. Welcome to our Coaching Voices. How are you today?
I'm well. How are you?
Let's kick off our today's call by talking about yourself. What can you tell us?
Sure. I originally was and still am a certified licensed counselor and moved into leadership. My research is kind of on the nexus of counseling, leadership, and leadership development. And in that process, also came into coaching through my university and my work at the United States Air Force Academy and the Center for Character and Leadership Development. And so saw that kind of overlap in counseling, clinical counseling, educational counseling, and coaching. Obviously, they're separate, but there's a lot of skill that overlaps. And in developing the next generation of and coaching the next generation of emotionally intelligent and interpersonally capable leaders.
What inspired you to become a coach?
I think the biggest thing that inspired me to move into coaching was my past experience in large organizations and looking at what I saw as the failures in my own leaders that made decisions that were egocentric in nature, leaders that could not emotionally regulate during times of stress, leaders that failed to set mission and vision for their organizations. And so I thought to myself, well, how can I get better at those things as a leader myself? And so engaged in coaching. And then how can I use my education, my background, and my organizational leadership experiences to help other leaders? And so I would say some of it came from just looking around and seeing deficits in those in leadership positions and wanted to be part of the solution rather than just complaining about it.
What success rate do you have in terms of transferring the leadership vision into a reality?
Obviously it depends on the client. Most of the clients I work with are those in, actually almost all the clients I work with are those in high-ranking career military officers moving through command and their next rank. And so from my leadership education and background, incorporating some concepts of psychoeducation and education around leadership theory. But obviously that's contingent on the client. Some clients will want coaching around general skill development that may be parallel to leadership. We're going to work on that with that being the client's goal. Sometimes those are set organizationally as folks are moving into promotions and rank advancement. And so some of that is a little more structured in regard to military organization. And so generally paired with a fair amount of assessment, coaching assessment, 360 assessments, things like that, the leadership outcomes are pretty successful, especially when you incorporate those 360 feedback tools to determine the coachee's self-understanding, self-concept in relations to how they're perceived by those that they're leading. And so bringing those two together, trying to get that Venn diagram to overlap a little bit better is the goal. And I see it pretty often over the course of several coaching sessions.
Dr. Markus, when we talk about the professional coaching, it's all about client's agenda. How did you perceive that?
Generally, yes. It depends on the career field. I work with a client group that is not required to attend coaching, highly encouraged, but more of a value-added resource through our center in support of the various squadrons. So yes, it's generally self-identified, but it's self-identified typically because they've spent concurrently, they'll spend a year with me in classes, getting a master's degree in counseling and leadership. And so over
Hmm.
the course of that year, there's a huge level of self-reflection that happens, a lot of feedback, a lot of growth. And so by the time that year's over and they take over squadron command, there's a level of self-understanding. Like, this is a theme I've heard quite frequently. Maybe I should start working on it. So the foundation has been laid for that self-reflection to identify some goals. And then, every so often I'll get somebody who they maybe have gotten some critical feedback in a performance evaluation, and then that's going to inform their goals. But I typically don't see clients, officers that were told to attend coaching. So that's maybe a different dynamic than some other folks see.
Thanks for that clarification. And really is, I believe it varies. Let's move on to some of the challenges that you face in your coaching practice.
I talk often with clients and students that in positions like this, in positions of leadership, you're never going to be an expert on everything, nor should you be expected to be. And so, we're not going to know every specific detail of their job duties. And so our goal is to kind of dive into their unique world and try to understand it as best we can, but not get lost in the weeds of corporate acronyms, military titles, codes, specific job duties, but thinking kind of more broadly, and helping the client with skills they want to develop and growth they want to develop. That's maybe a little more broadly applicable, but sometimes it's really easy to get lost in kind of the minutia, and very, very rarely is that what the client wants to focus on anyway. So sometimes I struggle with that. And working with military populations, they use a lot of acronyms, and that as a civilian, I'll never understand.
What I've seen in various industries that the command and control structure of leadership is pretty much going away, being replaced by more like a supportive of autonomous culture in there. How does that apply in the military? Are they still in that command and control, or there is some level of autonomy where people feel free to?
So there's a couple of key pieces to what you just said there. In thinking about formal leadership theories, and the folks I work with are moving into commands that are focused on developing others. And
Mhm.
so most folks, and even in corporate industry, a lot of folks' job is task oriented and not people oriented.
Right.
Your job is to complete the task and not necessarily develop people. And so we often say, like, most of these folks are coming, they're fighter pilots, they're bomber pilots, nuclear technicians, medical support officers. And so the goal of the military is bombs on target, right? It's task orientation. And they're moving into these roles where now their primary goal is developing others. And so in highly formalized and structured environments, it is invariable that people will lead through power. And in working with military, power is right there on your shirt, right? It's your rank.
Right.
And so in working with and developing leaders whose sole purpose now is to develop other leaders, we talk a lot about the science of understanding leadership through influence rather than leadership through status and power, and how even though you're given power and ascribed status because of your role, how do we develop relationship and rapport to lead through influence? So getting folks through leadership to do things they want to do rather than being doing things they're being told to, and that's the distinction. So we spend a fair amount of time there, and in developing other leaders. That's kind of a key point that is often an epiphany for some of these folks, and a wonderful epiphany. I love seeing that light bulb turn on.
Hmm. Let's switch gear a little bit from the leadership. Let's go back into the coaching. I definitely wanted to hear your thought here on somebody who's looking to get into the coaching career. What advice you have for them?
I would say first start with understanding yourself. What are your motivations and interests in working with others in this capacity?
Hmm.
There's a level of self exploration I think that is necessary in coaching when you're working with others, because sometimes folks are going to talk about goals and challenges and obstacles, and that's kind of the hope. but we don't want to hear some of these obstacles or challenges that cause us to make it about ourselves as coaches or throw us back to our personal experiences, because leaning too much on personal experiences will tint the lens in which we help clients reach their goals. And so understanding self, I think, is a big first step. And then obviously knowledge, skills, and ability. What specific knowledge, skills, and ability are you bringing to the table? And then looking at gaps in those knowledge, skills, and abilities in coaching and trying to shore those up for you through formal training, education, certification, things like that before you get in front of a client.
When you said that you need to know yourself first, so you do some level of personal evaluation to figure it out whether or not this coaching career is the right path for me or no?
Yes, absolutely. One, is it the right path for me? And then two, if you've decided it's the right path for you, where are my strengths and weaknesses in regard to coaching? Are there clients that in the beginning stages of my practice, I will be better suited to than others? And starting there and then building some confidence in practice based off of the clients you're working with. Because sometimes, not everybody clicks, and you're not going to click with every client. I see this in counseling. I see this in coaching. And so you got to understand yourself before you sit in front of somebody else and try to be seen as a knowledgeable, helpful, and supportive expert.
Right. Do you also encounter during your counseling session that people are coming to you and asking you to see whether or not this coaching career is the right career for me or not?
Yeah, often in my counseling practice, which is separate from my coaching practice, I do get a lot of kind of career counseling parallel clients that are going through some social emotional processes that they need support on, and often there is a career component to that. And so I see a lot of that in folks going through career transitions, folks that are retiring or maybe looking at a second career. And I have had a fair amount of folks, especially separated and retired service members, who are looking at coaching from their previous leadership experience. And so starting with that self-exploration and knowing what skills they've already developed that would lend themselves to coaching, and then formalizing that process, formalizing the education around it for certification. So yeah, I see a fair amount of that, especially from former leaders.
When people are looking to change their career, they potentially see coaching as a career as well, right? Why this trend is happening? Why more people are coming into the coaching?
One, I think people are becoming more aware of it. Coaching has its roots, several decades ago, but as far as being nationally and internationally recognized and popularized, I think people are becoming more aware of it. I think also, depending on what career people are coming from, they may have actually seen this and some of this in their organization. They may have had coaching themselves, or they may have seen coaching embedded in their organizations, and then realizing that as they've gained some experience, some knowledge, some interpersonal ability, that they might be good for it. So I think some of it is just mere exposure. Then I think of some of it is how we now build, coach, and train people in organizations differently than we did, 30 years ago.
Yeah, when I talk to various coaches, one of the things that I've noticed, a lot of people are going into the coaching practice is because they want to see some level of transformation from their clients. Also are more concerned about the clients being unhappy. When they go into the coaching career, it's serving those clients to make sure that, they're providing their service. And when they do that, they want to see those clients in a happy than what they were before, right? So it's about the transformation. Let's talk a little bit about the certification that potentially can propel your career. What do you think about those certifications? Because there are so many. And I've seen some coaches without having any certification, they have excelled more than those people who have like 10 different certifications.
I think some of it comes down to what is your prior experience and prior background. If you're pivoting careers from something entirely different, where maybe you weren't exposed to this in your organization, maybe don't have that experience from a degree program. Yeah, a lot of the certifications are a good entry point. I came into coaching after, a bachelor's, two masters, and a doctorate. And so, and all of those in counseling, psychology, and leadership. And so, been exposed a lot to academic concepts, but still saw the value in doing some certification work, one through ICF, to be, because kind of name brand recognition there. And then the other coaching certificate I got through the MBCC, which is one of the national counseling credentialing bodies, and for my BCC with MBCC, because I had a doctorate, I got 4 degrees counseling psychology. I just needed to submit all my records and transcripts because the value of the formal collegiate university education was identified. Something like ICF, there's different language that's used, trying to create common practice, professional practices, ethics. I see the value in that, in formalizing and kind of codifying the practice of coaching. And yes, I absolutely agree. There are folks who have gone through many certifications, but if you lack that self-awareness, self-concept, interpersonal ability, you're going to struggle as a coach, perhaps. And there are people who are highly interpersonal, highly reflective, have strong skill sets without any certification. So yeah, I see both, but I also see the same thing with any kind of professional practice. There are people out there who call themselves counselors without a license, and they're serviceable. And then I see folks who have worked towards a license, and I wouldn't send a client to them. So I don't think that's unique to coaching, but I do see that in coaching. Yes.
Do you like coaching or counseling?
I love both for very different reasons. Because you're serving two different sets of clients for two different reasons. I like coaching, kind of rooted in that model of positive psychology, strength-based coaching. How do we increase awareness and growth and work towards thriving? And how do we leverage our strengths?
Right.
In counseling, often it's, depending on your theoretical orientation, still a medical model of counseling. Like what maybe is a challenge for you, or what's quote going wrong right now, and how do we work on that? And so I see them overlapping, but kind of different ends of the spectrum in regard to client need. And that's why I enjoy both. But you hit on it a little while back. I love both because they're both in service of others, and that's a priority value for me. And so I'm able to be of service to others in really two different capacities.
That's really an excellent thought. Dr. Markus, if I may ask you this, what are the strategies the new coaches should deploy in order to establish their client base businesses?
It's going to sound cliche, but it's networking. And when I say networking, it doesn't mean going out and shaking hands at a professional cocktail hour. I think of networking as who's already in your professional network, and assessing what they may need, or who's in their network that might need something. So first off, assessing like what's the need. And in my community, the need is coaching for the population I work with, military folks. I don't live in Silicon Valley, so I'm not coaching anybody in the tech industry. So what does your industry need? And establishing a foothold there. And then what organizations in your community can you partner with? So starting kind of locally and then expanding from there, obviously. And so we have, I'm in the process of propping up a leadership center at my university, the Whole Person Leadership Center. But that came about in partnering with a local organization, Leadership Pikes Peak, that's been around for 50 years. And they had established programming in regard to leadership training, but did not have coaching embedded into their community leadership development. These are business leaders in the community. And so in talking with them, they wanted to embed coaching practices. And that's where we saw an opportunity to partner and bring in Leadership Pikes Peak into our leadership center at my university. So what was the community need? And we found it. We found it in somebody who's already pre-established, but had a gap in their programming specific to coaching. And then from there, once you've established credibility with that group of clients, a lot of it is also word of mouth. Once you've got your foot in the door with a handful of clients,
Hmm.
if you're doing well and they're finding success, they'll tell their friends about you.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's how you scale your business. How do you measure your success in both sides of the world, coaching as well as counseling?
In coaching, how do I measure my success or outcomes are that cyclical kind of evaluation process where you ask the coachee at interim points, how they feel they're working towards their goal attainment. I may see one thing in regard to success with the client,
Hmm.
but if the client doesn't feel successful, then it wasn't successful. And sometimes you'll have a coachee who never feels successful, right? They're always kind of working towards the next thing. But taking those interim assessment points and checking with the coachee to see how they feel they're working towards their goal attainment, what noticeable changes have they seen in interactions with others, their own behavior, their own cognitions, and have them self-rate, and then use that at different points to determine if we're moving forward, if we're backsliding. And then a variety of assessments. So, for example, I use the hardiness resiliency scale, the Mesquite, the EQI 2.0 in coaching.
Hmm.
Um, and so for the hardiness resiliency scale, for example, I have a pre and post. I do that pre and post to see if there's any quantifiable change
Right,
uh,
right.
in resiliency. And I have seen in my last two cohorts an increase of around one full standard deviation from the general population after their coaching and their formal coursework.
I was talking to you earlier about the ethics and the character development in leadership. How relevant is that in the coaching?
I think often it comes up whether the client knows it or not. A lot of clients I see that are struggling with something at work, not always, but a fair amount of it comes down to maybe some cognitive dissonance around what their role is, what their values are, and what they're being asked to do organizationally, or what they're being told to do organizationally. And so understanding, depending on their field, what are their professional ethics? What are their personal values? And when those are misaligned with their actual work behaviors, it feels scratchy, it feels itchy, it doesn't feel right. And sometimes we're consciously aware of that, sometimes we're subconsciously aware of that. So then if we are in a place of ethical misalignment, how can the client create a goal around aligning that?
Right.
And especially in leadership coaching for leadership development, the research historically has told us that most C-suite executives, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, get promoted
Hmm.
because they have a specialized knowledge. They have a specialized task knowledge, but they're often fired because of lack of ethical decision making and transparency, or
Hmm.
lack of interpersonal skill and knowledge. And so, what gets them to their leadership position isn't what keeps them there. And so, we often see those ethical decision making issues actually force people out of leadership. And so, even if it's not something that's an issue for the coachee at the time, it's something that I often see now is on their minds as they proceed to leadership.
Okay. What strategies those leaders can utilize to foster their ethical behavior within
Sure.
their organization?
Sure. So, first is values identification. Like, what principles and values inform you as a worker, you as a leader, you as a person? What are the values and principles of the organization? And ideally those things align. And so, an initial awareness, or where might these things misalign, and a level of awareness. So, if I have this personal value or principle, the organization has this, there are going to be times when those things don't agree. And so, a level of awareness to identify when that is happening. The other is consultation. I think folks working in an organization that are feeling these burdens of ethical decision making need to consult with others. No ethical decision typically should be made in isolation because we miss information. And then three is utilizing formal ethical decision making models. There's a number of them out there. And in coaching, I have had some clients talk about this. And so we've gone through practicing ethical decision making using a formalized model that walks you step by step through the process. Kitchener's model of ethical decision making is one good example that comes from the helping professions that folks generally orient to pretty easily initially.
Really great. So we're talking about the self-awareness that's crucial in the development as well, right?
Correct.
We're heading towards the end of the show, and this particular question I asked to every coaches who come to our show about this new development in the technology, artificial intelligence, whether or not you see any kind of threat from artificial intelligence at this time.
I see some challenges, but I see some opportunities.
Okay.
I think being fearful of AI is doing a disservice to us as practitioners and to our clients. We know that generative AI is still in its kind of infancy, and the information it pulls isn't always the most accurate, and it's never as personalized to the individual as it could be. The opportunity there is use of AI for general strategies, general attainment of knowledge, but the value of coaching, and truly the value of anything within the helping professions and service to others, is the interpersonal connection, the rapport and the relationship that's built between two people looking at each other face to face, one in support of the other. Will AI get to the point where it can spit out text and verbalize that in the same way? Perhaps, but that human connection is foundational to self-insight and to personal growth. And so I think as coaches continue to prioritize getting to know their clients, building rapport, connection, creating psychological safety around coaching, there is an opportunity there that I don't think AI, at least in our generation before we retire, is going to get to that point that can replicate a highly emotionally intelligent coach.
Thank you for that insight, Dr. Markus. Before we close our show, do you have anything that you want to bring up?
I think you hit the nail on the head for those exploring going into coaching. Just assess your motivations. I think folks that I've seen try to go into coaching see it as highly lucrative, and it has the potential to be over time. But assessing your motivations, are you human first person? Are you person centered? Are you setting a goal of being service to others? And are you capable of holding that kind of unconditional positive regard for a client that sometimes you might disagree with? And if you have those motivations around helping others thrive, it's going to be a great fit. And outside of that, never rest on your laurels. The field of helping others is it's imperative that we're constantly upskilling, constantly learning new information, constantly understanding the science behind the practice. And if you're doing those two things, I think you're going to be very successful in the field. And have fun with it. Have fun with it. I think coaches have a tendency to take themselves a little seriously. But if we're having fun, the client's going to have fun.
Thank you for that insight, Dr. Markus. Have a great day.
Yeah, you as well.
That was Dr. Markus Moeder-Chandler in conversation with Pravin Sharma for Coaching Voices. If you'd like to get in touch with Dr. Chandler, you can send an email to him at mmoedercc@uccs.edu. We'll be bringing out coaching-related topics in coming episodes from the Insight Ignite Coaching. If you find this content helpful, share with your friends and colleagues, and follow our show in Spotify, Apple Podcast, YouTube, and in our own webpage at www.insightignitecoaching.com. Please continue to leave your candid feedback. That's the only way we can grow and serve our coaching community. Thank you for listening.